What's up, everyone? It is Arkey Hodges, Black Achievement Fund and Education for Life Academy president here for class 6 of our Missing Pages of World History lecture series in honor of Dr. John Henrik Clarke. For those of you who are just tuning in and may not know who Dr. John Henrik Clarke is, Dr. John Henrik Clarke was a phenomenal master teacher. Through his teachings, I was able to learn about African history from the origins of humanity over 200,000 years ago, as opposed to beginning history with African-American history, which begins with enslavement. I chose to do this lecture series because when I graduated undergrad from the University of Virginia with a degree in African-American studies and history, and then went on and graduated from Cornell University with the master's degree in Africana, what I realized was that I didn't know anything about African history. And that is what I was seeking. What I got was virtually 100% of African-American history, African-American history, African-American history. And it was very discomforting to be donned with these prestigious degrees and not have virtually any knowledge of African history before enslavement. So when I met Dr. John Henrik Clarke and I started listening to his lectures and all of those things, it opened up an Africa that I never knew existed. In Africa that, you hear about, oh, we used to be queens and kings and all of those things. You hear about it, but you're never shown the evidence of it. You're never shown how extensive this history is. You're never shown how old this history is. And because you're not taught this history, because this history isn't given any type of serious consideration in academia, we tend to think that it's not that important. However, it is the absolute most important aspect of knowledge today. And I'm going to tell you why. And I encourage all of you, this is a conversation as much as it is a lecture. So you got the chat, use the chat. But here is where I stand in 2022 with racism, with white power, white supremacy. In order to destroy something, and we're talking about racism here, we're talking about white supremacy here. In order to destroy something, you must destroy it at its foundation, at its roots. Otherwise, you can never destroy something. What is the foundation of racism? What is the foundation of white supremacy? The foundation of white supremacy and the foundation of racism is the false propaganda that European people brought the light to the world, that the world was in darkness until European people came and brought the light, that Africa was the dark continent until European missionaries came and brought Christianity, until European conquerors came and enslaved Africans and brought them to America. Prior to that, Africans had no record of achievement whatsoever. The ancient Egyptians, oh, they're not Black African. Why would you even consider, that's ridiculous. No, the people of ancient Egypt are Black African people. When ancient Egypt was first founded, the entire civilization was Black African. The civilization of ancient Egypt, of ancient Kemet, lasted for over 3,000 years. Over 2,000 years, African ruled. What we have now is a situation whereby we're in 2022. To destroy racism, all we have to do, or all white people have to do, is to begin to tell the truth about world history. is to simply show what we have been showing you through this lecture series and with Education for Life Academy for so long. This is the timeline of world history. Human beings like you and I first originated in Africa over 200,000 years ago. Right now, tonight, we're going to be studying ancient Nubia. The foundations of ancient Nubia are around 10,000 BC. Okay? The ancient Greeks, who are the oldest of the Europeans, didn't come out of their dark ages until 900 BC. Prior to this period right here that I'm showing you, this 900 BC, there was absolutely no civilization of European people whatsoever. The word Europe was not even invented. There was no writing, there was no religion, there was no architecture. There was nothing prior to this. When these people start first coming into Africa, and these are the oldest of the Europeans, the Greeks, when they first started coming into Africa, they were in awe. They were taught by African people. They learned everything they knew from Africa and returned to Greece and became philosophers. In order to get rid of racism, all we have to do is to present the truth of human history. When you present the truth of human history, what you see is that all human beings originated in Africa, and that the greatest civilizations ever known to man, the most humane civilizations ever known to man, were Black African civilizations. When you study history from the origins of humanity in Africa and go chronological, what you will find is that all of the things that Europeans claim that they invented were invented thousands of years before they were even a country. I present to you this lecture series, I present to you the Education for Life Academy as to provide you with all the evidence you need to challenge any white teacher, professor, anyone on the earth. All you have to do is sit with them with this timeline and ask them the simple questions. This is the timeline of human history. Is it true that the Greeks, the oldest of the Europeans, didn't come out of their dark ages until around 900 BC? Yes or no? If that is the truth, then why do we start world history in public schools in the United States of America with Western civilization, and African history with African-American history with enslavement? Disregarding all of this history when Africa was teaching the entire world how to be human. I'm going to read to you, and I'm taking this directly out of our curriculum. African people do not own African history. African historians do not own African history. African history right now is owned by our oppressors. There is a prophetic African proverb that goes, "It is the lion hunter who writes the lion's history." When that lion hunter writes the lion's history, how do you think the lion hunter is going to write the lion's history? He's going to write it in his favor. He's going to make it seem like it was just and the best thing to do to kill the lion. We have to be able to regain control over our own history and defend our own history from those who are seeking to impugn it, strictly to maintain the lie of white supremacy. If white people begin to teach what I'm teaching right now, and this is all facts, and I want you to pay very careful attention to the sources that I use. I'm not using John Henry Clarke and Dr. Ben and Asa Hillier and Anthony Browder. Of course, I reference all of them and I provide links to all of their works. I use on the main activities White sources. And the reason why I use white sources is because we don't own our history. When you hear a white person say it, when we hear a white person say it, when we hear somebody from Harvard say it, that's when we take it seriously. So I'm going to read with you right now how the archaeologists from Harvard felt about Nubian treasures when they first went to Nubia and began to excavate the Nubian treasures. Now, this is a team from the Boston Museum of Arts and Harvard University, all right? This is from Black Kingdoms of the Nile. And this is, I believe this is PBS. But I'll share with you guys later the link to it. This is by Timothy Kendall. In the 1820s, the Western world was thrilled to hear news of the rediscovery of the monuments of ancient Nubia, or Kush, as it was called in the Bible. The ruins, hundreds of miles south of Egypt in the Sudan, had been reported almost simultaneously by individual British, French, and American travelers whose excited descriptions and glorious illustrations of temples and pyramid fields delighted scholars and reawakened interest in this mysterious African kingdom. Greek traditions told of Memnon, a legendary Nubian king who had fought in the Trojan War. They spoke of Nubia's people who were the, quote, tallest and handsomest on earth, end quote, and whose piety was so great that the gods preferred their offerings to those of all other men. The Greeks also knew that historical Nubian kings had once conquered Egypt and ruled it for 60 years, and that their dynasty was counted as Egypt's 25th, and it was actually 100 years. The Greeks, however, did not call these people Nubians or Cushites as we do today. They called them Aethiopes or Ethiopians, which in Greek meant burnt-faced ones. They knew perfectly well that Nubians were black-skinned, as are the Sudanese of the same regions today. During the 1840s, the great German Egyptologist Carl Richard Lipsius led an expedition to record the monuments of Egypt and Sudan for the King of Prussia. On his return, he asserted confidently that the Greek term Ethiopian, when referring to the ancient civilized people of Kush, did not apply to Negroes, but was used to describe reddish-skinned people closely related to the Egyptians who, quote, belonged to the Caucasian race. Again, in 1852, when the American diplomat Bayard Taylor visited Sudan and gazed upon the temple carvings of sumptuously clad gods and rulers with clearly African features, he also found it inconceivable that they could have been created by black-skinned Africans. Rather, he asserted, echoing Lipsius, they must have been created by Egyptians or by immigrants from India or Arabia, or in any case, by an offshoot of the race to which we belong. Lipsius and Taylor failed to acknowledge the fact that the Greeks themselves never confused Ethiopians with Egyptians, or that they always used the term Ethiopian to apply equally to the peoples of Kush and Central Africa. Such racist opinions and scientific distortions among Western scholars of the 19th century, while not universal, did unhappily predominate and shape the attitudes that for another full century would retard and confuse the discipline of Nubian studies and African civilization in general. So remote was the northern Sudan that scientific archaeology could not take place there until the British seized control of the country in 1898 and opened it up with the completion of the Cairo-Khartoum Railway. The first major excavations were undertaken by famed Egyptologist George A. Reisner, whose team, sponsored by Harvard University and the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, would first excavate Kerma in 1913, the Gebel Barkal temples from 1916 to 1920, and all the royal pyramids of Kush between 1917 and 1924. Almost single-handedly, Reisner laid the foundations of Nubian history, reconstructing it from the Bronze Age to the dawn of the Christian era. He also deciphered the names and approximate order and dates of all the Kushite monarchs through some 70 generations from the 8th century BC to the 3rd century AD. It was a towering achievement, almost unparalleled in the annals of archaeology. While Reisner's deductions still strike us as astonishing for their brilliance and essential correctness, We are equally appalled to discover his inability to accept that the monuments he excavated were built by bona fide Black men. Using entirely specious evidence, he formulated a theory that the founders of the 25th or Ethiopian dynasty of Egypt were not Black Sudanese, but rather a branch of the, quote, Egypto-Libyan, by which he meant fair-skinned ruling class of Dynasty 22, and that they were called Ethiopians by the Greeks simply because they dominated a darker-skinned native Negroid population, which, as he stated, quote, had never developed either its trade or any industry worthy of mention, end quote. Like Taylor and Lipsis, believing absolutely that skin pigmentation was a determinant of intellectual ability and enlightenment, Reisner attributed the apparent cultural decline of the Napatan phase of the Kushite culture between 660 and 300 BC to the, quote, deadening effects of racial intermarriage between its imagined light-skinned elite and darker-skinned holy polloi. The Meroitic cultural renaissance after 300 BC, he explained as simply the result of new influxes of Egyptians. Nubian cultures, he reasoned, were not as developed as Egyptian because the people were of mixed race. Yet by virtue of their relationship to the superior Egyptian race, they were elevated far above the, quote, inert mass of the Black races of Africa, end quote. This was Reisner at his worst. Such unabashed racist interpretations, widely published in scholarly journals at the time and accepted as gospel by the popular press, today offend and embarrass all of us. Yet it is interesting to note how such pervasive racism then affected the discipline of Nubian studies in America. Reisner, very much a product of his time, seems to have had an unconscious need to believe that his Kushite kings were, quote, white, or white men in darker skin, or dark men with white souls, in order to make them and their culture more worthy of study to himself and more acceptable to the contemporary scholarly and museum-going public, and perhaps even to his financial backers at the Museum of Fine Arts. Yet whether judged as white or Black, Nubian civilization could not have received much popular interest at the time. If it were merely an offshoot of a, quote, white Egypt in Central Africa, as Reisner theorized, then it would inevitably be judged as late, decadent, and peripheral, i.e. to the Egypto-centered and Eurocentric universe. If it were Black, then in the minds of his contemporaries, it would be utterly irrelevant to history. In either case, it seemed to offer attractions as an area of study for Egyptologists of that generation, and almost none pursued it. Contemporary books on Egyptian history virtually ignored it. Even as late as the 1940s and 50s, the racial identity of the Nubians remained problematic for white scholars. For example, when the bones of the Kushite royalty recovered from Reisner's excavations were sent for analysis to the specialists at the Peabody Museum at Harvard, the latter identified them as belonging to the, quote, basic white stock of Egypt. This is Harvard. In this case, the osteologists like Lipsis, Taylor, and Reisner evidently wished to claim them for their own race. Yet when the respected University of Chicago Egyptologists Keith Seal and George Steindorf, who were not subscribers to Reisner's, quote, Libyan theory, published their own history of Egypt in 1942, when Egypt ruled the East, they left no doubt about their biases in the two sentences they used to dismiss the 25th dynasty. Quote, in the place of a native Egyptian pharaoh or of the usurping Libyans, the throne of Egypt was occupied by a Negro king from Ethiopia, but his dominion was not for long, end quote. Today, 57 years after the publication of this book, the 25th dynasty Negro kings are now recognized as having sponsored an important renaissance of Egyptian art and culture. They developed an almost scholarly interest in ancient Egyptian traditions and language and have been called, quote, the first Egyptologists. The empire over which they presided was greater in extent than any ever achieved in antiquity along the Nile Valley. Their kings were said never to have condemned prisoners to death. They forgave their enemies and allowed them to retain their offices. They also actually gave public credit for achievement in their inscriptions to individuals other than themselves. Such characteristics among other ancient monarchs of Egypt or the Near East are unheard of, and we can only assume these were native Nubian qualities. Yet for Egyptologists of the first half of the 20th century, The fact that they were Negro marked this period as the lowest level to which Egyptian civilization had sunk in its history. When the master material from Reisner's excavations in the Sudan was sent back to the Boston Museum in 1924, most of it went into storage and was all but forgotten. When in the late 1970s, it was rediscovered by the museum's curators, they joyously identified it as one of the museum's most important and unique treasures, assigned it to several national and international touring exhibitions, and finally installed it in a special permanent gallery. White racism in scholarly circles disappeared with the civil rights movement of the 1960s. You'll hear this is crazy. White racism in scholarly circles disappeared with the civil rights movement of the 1960s, but it was replaced with the virulent new Black racism. Which many African Americans adopted as a belated response to the former, even before the rehabilitation of ancient Kush. This spawned the discipline called Afrocentrism, which interpreted African history through the anger of the modern Black experience and which vaunted Egypt as a Black African culture and even the fountainhead of European civilization. He's saying this as if this is preposterous, when we know, in fact, that this is absolutely the case. Ironically, like the racism of Reisner's day, this trend also diminishes the significance of Kush, since the exponents minimize the ethnic and cultural differences between it and Egypt and still give primary emphasis to the achievements of Egypt, which isn't true. In the 1990s, the future of Nubian studies in America looks brighter than ever. The quote unquote Blackness of Kushite art and culture, which once generally negated its interest for Americans, is now precisely what makes it so interesting for them. It is to be hoped that in the new millennium, all Americans will come to grasp that neither Reisner and his contemporaries on the one hand understood, nor the modern Afrocentrists on the other understand that proper study of the past is not attainable unless we can identify and transcend our own biases. At some point, we will all need to recognize that the race to which we belong, to use Bayard Taylor's phrase, is neither Black nor white, but simply human with all its extraordinary creative abilities and all its external failings. Now, great acknowledgement that white people at the top of the food chain, Harvard University, Boston Museum of Fine Arts, University of Chicago, Oriental Institute, that they all collectively, even looking right at an African sculpture, African features, clearly African, would write in scholarly journals that this is not an African person. But what's more damning about all of this is that all of the publications looked at the same material, Black African person, just looked like me, and say he's not Black. He belonged to some other mythical race that no longer exists. He's not Black. People, even as this white guy, and he's white, Timothy Kendall, we're talking about African history, African culture. And he's trying to write something to acknowledge the racism of Harvard, and he's a Harvard guy. Let me ask you this. In the 1990s, were there no Black historians at Harvard? Were there no Black archaeologists at Harvard? They still, in this modern era, cannot see their innate racism. Why would you feel that you are qualified to write the introduction on ancient Nubian history as a white man? How can you equate the racism of Reisner, of Lipsis, of Taylor, and say that Black historians who pointed out that the ancient Egyptians were Black African people were just as racist in their thought as Lipsis, Taylor, and company? If you paid really close attention as I was reading, what you would have heard was that Timothy Kendall essentially exonerated Carl Lipsis, Taylor, Reisner. He exonerated all of them. He chalked up their racism to what? They were men of their time. Then he went so far as to say that white racism in scholarly circles disappeared with the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Disappeared. This is a very smart guy. Why would you use such an absolute term like disappear? Who would in their right mind claim that white racism in scholarly circles disappeared with the civil rights movement? Were all white Americans for the civil rights movement? And did those Americans who were not, white Americans who were not for the civil rights movement, did they all of a sudden start accepting that African people were the progenitors of all of the knowledge, even the knowledge of their ancestors? No. So I say all this to say, we cannot escape propaganda from white people. Bottom line. This guy, Timothy Kendall, he believes himself to be liberal. He believes that he is doing something honorable by being a white man and acknowledging the Africanity of ancient Nubia, while simultaneously denying the Africanity of ancient Egypt, condemning the white races who said that it is absolutely ridiculous to think that African or Negroid people created this civilization. He equated them with people like Dr. John Henry Clark, with people like Molefi Asante, who were simply trying to correct the racist people that he's talking about. He made them to be equal. If you are not very sophisticated, if you're not reading very closely, if your mind isn't consciously aware to carefully screen anything a white person says about Black people and Black history, you will overlook all of the racism that he carries as he's talking about the racism of his ancestors. He can't even understand his own racism. I'm going to show you how he looks. Here he is. When I tell you that Black people, we don't control our own culture. Here's Harvard University. Here's the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, doing an intense study on an African civilization, and they felt no need to have an African historian, an African archaeologist be a part of the conversation. If that isn't the heart of arrogance, and what it says is this: they are absolutely afraid to present an African scholar because an African scholar is not going to, on the one hand, condemn the white races, and then at the same time try to say that the Black men who tried to say that the white races were lying are also as bad as the white races themselves. When you read an article like this, you say, man, they're openly acknowledging all of this. Well, let me tell you something, people. It's a trick. People like him, other white Egyptologists, this is what they try to do. They have tried to make ancient Nubia and ancient Egypt to be separate and distinct, both culturally and racially. Both culturally and racially. They cannot allow the ancient Egyptians to be similar in culture and in race as the Nubians. If they did that, now they're going to have to now accept The Afrocentrists who he's talking about claim that the ancient Egyptians were also Black African in the same regard as the Nubians that Reisner and Taylor and Lipsis refuse to acknowledge. Look right at their statues. Right now and today. Now, he wrote that in the 1990s, okay? I searched his name, try to see what new research he did since the royal pharaohs from the New Kingdom, King Tut, Nefertiti, Akhenaten, Amenhotep III, Queen T, Queen T's mother, Queen T's father, having modern DNA analysis that was not available in 1990. It's now available. I share with you, and I'm gonna share again, the results of the DNA analysis of the most iconic pharaohs of ancient Egypt, including King Tut. Now, this came out in 2012. Where is Timothy Kendall with the revised analysis? Where are any of the quote unquote liberal white historians? This is the DNA analysis of King Tut and his family. Okay. Hello and welcome to the January 2012 issue of DNA Tribes Digest. This month's article features an analysis of several mummies, including the famous King Tut and his relatives. These individuals lived in a unique time more than 3,000 years ago, the Amarna period, which has left a vivid archaeological record of life in pharaonic Egypt. Okay. Historical background. During the exploration of Egypt, a puzzle emerged along the Nile River, a singular ancient city that had been hastily abandoned to the desert. The site dated to the mid-1300s BCE, the height of the New Kingdom Egypt, and became known as Amarna, named for the local Beni Amran tribe. Unusual discoveries here included cuneiform tablets, the Amarna letters, written in a peripheral Akkadian vernacular spoken in the Levantine cities of the former Hyksos and their relatives to the north. Even more unusual was the Amarna. Let me just skip to that and go to the analysis. All right. Geographical analysis of the Amarna mummies was performed using their autosomal STR profiles based on 8 tested loci. Results are summarized in Table 1 and illustrated in Figure 1. Maps for individual Amarna mummies are included in Figures 2 to 8 in the appendix. Discussion. The average MLI scores in Table 1 indicate the STR profiles of the Amarna mummies would be most frequent in present-day populations of several African regions, including the Southern African Great Lakes, and tropical West African regions. Now, when you look at the MLI, at the top in blue here, Thuya is Queen T's father, and Yuya is her mother. KV35EL is Queen T. She is the grandmother of King Tut. She is the royal wife of Amenhotep III. She is a bona fide Nubian woman, okay? This is a very, 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 very important lecture. I don't want you guys to miss this. Because when you're talking about this to people who are trying to deny what you're saying, to deny this truth, I want you to share this information with them and then have them say what it is they want to say. Okay? The most frequent loci of their DNA, of this DNA analysis, was Southern African, and then the African Great Lakes. Nothing Mediterranean, nothing European, nothing Asian. Okay. Here is a map where the majority of loci of MLI scores were found for all of these mummies. Do you see these yellow dots? This is Southern Africa. Where is Timothy Kendall? Where are all the white liberal historians? If this was discovered that these yellow dots were anywhere else on the entire continent, it would have been world news. It would have been world news. The fact that the DNA analysis proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that some of the most iconic pharaohs and queens from ancient Egypt came from Southern Africa. This is DNA evidence. Black people didn't do this DNA evidence. They didn't do this analysis. Okay, now let me show you Queen T. Who is King Tut's grandmother? You see this? This is King Tut's grandmother. This is KV 35 EL in the Valley of the Kings. That is her designated tomb. Okay, this is his grandmother. So just like Lipsis and Taylor and Reisner and company saw statues of African people, clear African features, looked at them and said they were white. What do you think Timothy Kendall will look at this statue and say? What do you think Timothy Kendall will look at the DNA analysis of this woman right here that showed that she was from Southern Africa? What would Timothy Kendall say? Timothy Kendall will say the same thing that the people that he condemned 100 years ago said. These people ain't Black African. He say the same thing. In fact, I just showed you guys, he's still around. He's still around. If anyone want to do it, contact him. Contact him. And ask him for a response. I bet you won't get one. I bet you won't. White people cannot let go of racism. They cannot do it. In order to destroy racism, all of you out here listening are very intelligent people. Destroy the foundation of racism, which are the lies that Black people achieved nothing in world history and waited in darkness until the Europeans came and brought the light, and that slavery actually benefited us. That's the narrative. That's racism. That is the definition of racism. That is the foundation of racism. The only way to kill racism, to destroy racism, is to destroy the foundation, is to destroy the lies with the truth. Replace the lies with the truth. If you replace the lies with the truth, the world gets flipped on its head. Now, all of a sudden, African people, Black African people, are the world's geniuses. Because no other people on this planet can say that they achieved anything greater than ancient Egypt. No one can. There are no people on this planet can say that their people were as smart as the African people of ancient Egypt. Nobody can. So now, if you're forced to acknowledge that the civilization of ancient Egypt is Black African in the same way that you were forced to acknowledge that the civilization of Nubia is Black African, what do you do then? If you taught the world this lecture series, which is all facts, and everything that I just read to you, acknowledging the racism of white historians, archaeologists at places like Harvard, Boston Museum of Fine Arts, the Peabody Institute, all of these people are liars. They're liars, and they knew they were liars. They are so blinded by their racism, even at the highest rungs of liberalism. You know, Timothy would say, I'm a liberal guy. I just wrote this and just straight up said these people were racist. As he was being racist. Couldn't even acknowledge it. Couldn't even acknowledge it. To destroy racism, tell the truth. Tell the truth about world history. Tell the truth that you lied about African people being in the dark until white people came. Tell the truth that African people were in the light while European and white people were in the dark, and that European people discovered knowledge through African people, discovered spirituality through African people. Tell the truth. Show the timeline. Challenge me. Challenge me. Anybody out there who says that the ancient people of Kemet, the ancient Egyptians, were not Black African, please challenge me. People out there, if you have this conversation with anyone who says otherwise, send them my way. We do it in public. I don't care what school you're from. We'll do it in public. Black people, listen to me. Listen to me and listen to me good. You will never be liberated so long as you believe in white supremacy. And when I say white supremacy, black people is like, what Black person you know believe in white supremacy? We demonstrate it through our actions. We have set back and allowed European people to take the reins of world power. And instead of us trying to return to our African essence so that we can tap into the genius that created the civilization of ancient Kemet, we out here trying to be honorary Europeans. And just like Timothy Kendall is blind by his racism, many of us are blind by our attempts of becoming honorary European. You tell a Black person, why are you trying to become honorary European? He'd be like, what are you talking about? But then when you break it down, you say, okay, you send your kids to a public school, which they're taught European culture is everything. They start your own culture off with slavery. Okay, y'all ain't done nothing but slavery. All the clothes you buy, European. The cities you want to visit, the places you want to go, European. The people you work for, European. The food, European. We can never return to our greatness following a European. Following people who don't even believe in our genius. And is frightened of it at the same time. How can you openly say these people are stupid and inferior, and then at the same time try to hold their hands behind their back so they can't achieve greatness? Out of all of the people that Europeans encountered, after they came out from under being colonized by African and Arab people from 711 AD to 1492 AD, you guys know of this civilization as the Moorish civilization. After being colonized, and when I say colonized, I want you to know that when Tariq Zayed al-Gabral, the African general who led the march into the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD, and conquered the Visigoths in Spain, they were seen as liberators. The Arab Islamic Empire, when it conquered Europe, it did not persecute Christians. It did not persecute the Jews. In fact, they allowed the Christians to continue to practice Christianity. They allowed the Jewish people to continue to practice Judaism, to continue to build synagogues. In addition to that, they taught them. They taught them how to navigate the seas again. They taught them, they brought electric lights. They brought cleanliness, running water. It was benevolent. When the Europeans set out to colonize the world, there was nothing benevolent about it for other people. You heard what this white man said about the rulers of Nubia. What did they do to their enemies? They openly acknowledge individual citizens. Every time you hear of African civilizations, they are the opposite of what you hear of European civilization. European people would like to make you think that you just like them, that there is a universal human worldview. We're not like them. And I'm not going to say all. You have white people who are literally fighting their racism. But if they have been taught just like you've been taught with no evidence to the contrary, how can we blame them? Because in the same way that white people believe it, Black people believe it. So if we believe it ourselves, why wouldn't you think that white people believe the racism too? And when I say we believe it ourselves, I say that because if you didn't believe it, you would make sure that your children and everybody you knew the truth. We don't know the truth. We have to have lecture series like this in which I'm preaching to the choir and hoping that this gets shared enough to where more and more people would have access to it. But do you think a public school system in the United States of America would allow our Kihajas to come in there and teach anything? Absolutely not. Do you think a public school, I don't care if it's a Black teacher, Black principal, Black superintendent, they are so scared to death that they would get fired for teaching the truth, for working to eradicate racism by destroying racism at its foundation, which is the false lies about Africa, the hidden history of African people. Let me share some more about ancient Nubia. Now, this is coming from the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Once again today, I've shared with you all resources from white people. I shared with you the article from Timothy Kendall, who is a product of Harvard and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. I shared with you the DNA analysis that was done by DNA tribes who are not African-American people. And now I'm sharing with you an article on the land of Nubia by the Metropolitan Museum in New York. What race do you think Janice Cameron is? You think she's African, African-American? Okay, the land of Nubia. The region of Nubia begins at the point just south of Khartoum in the Sudan, where the Blue and White Nile join, and is linked to Egypt by the Nile River, which flows northward through both lands to the Mediterranean. Riverine navigation in Nubia was impeded by a series of 6 narrow rocky passages called cataracts, areas where granite outcrops emerged from beneath the softer sandstone that underlays most of the Nile Valley. The first cataract, just south of Aswan in Egypt, marks the separation of Egypt and Nubia, while the second cataract separates Upper and Lower Nubia. Fertile land was not continuous along the roughly 160 miles of the Nubian Nile. Rather, cultivated areas beside the river were interspersed with desert sands and rocky mountains. Let me give you an example. When you look at this map here, the area which is Nubia, and Egypt itself is 96% desert, 96% desert. So when they talk about those cataracts are natural formations that impede travel on the Nile. So because you have all of these rocks and granite and all of these things at the cataracts, the silt from the Nile does not spread as far inland as it does in Egypt. As you move past the first cataract, the river becomes easy. And all the silt, all of that rich silt and soil that the river has been collecting from the interior of Africa is released in the Nile Delta, which flows into the Mediterranean Sea. And all of this rich silt provides all of the nutrients for Egypt to grow in a massive amount of food. So much so that this was the way that the ancient Rome was able to come and take over northern Africa, was because they were able to feed their large armies with the food from Egypt. Okay. Over the millennia, a series of cultures and kingdoms rose and fell in Nubia, but the Nubian people did not have a written language of their own until the Meroitic period, 275 BC to 300 AD. Now, when they say that the Nubian people didn't have writing of their own, the Nubian people and the people of ancient Egypt, or both Black African people sharing the same geographical space and had shared that same geographical space for millennia. These people shared a worldview, they shared a culture, and because they were so intricately linked, why would you not think they shared language? If they're to say that the hieroglyphs were created, first established around 3100 BC, when ancient Kemet is first founded, if that is a new language, wouldn't this new language be in collaboration? Wouldn't the Nubian people know the same language if this is the language for commerce? Anyway, as a result, our knowledge of their history and culture derives from either from Egyptian sources, which are often biased against other societies, or archaeological excavations. While some scientific exploration of Nubia took place in the early to mid 19th century, extensive work began only in the early 20th century when a dam was first constructed at Aswan. So the Aswan Dam actually permanently put underwater unknown African Nubian cultural relics. Key to our understanding of the region is the work of the Archaeological Survey of Nubia, which began in September 1907. Also adding immeasurably to our knowledge of Nubia was the Nubian Salvage Project, carried out at the behest of the Egyptian government between 1960 and 1964, when plans to build the high dam at Aswan threatened to submerge the monuments of Lower Nubia, including the Temple of Dendur, as well as Abu Simbel, which they physically moved to a different location. This UNESCO-sponsored initiative involved more than 70 separate archaeological missions from 25 different countries. Yet Anthony Browder is the only African-American that the Egyptian government has ever allowed to come and excavate an African site. Ancient Nubia had a complex series of political interactions and cultural exchanges with Egypt, largely based on its position as an intermediary between the Mediterranean world and sub-Saharan Africa, which made it a key transit point for luxury goods such as ivory and exotic objects. Of great importance was gold, a commodity found in the Nubian deserts and greatly prized by the Egyptians. Relations of trade and warfare are known as early as the beginning of the dynastic period in Egypt, circa 31 BC, and continued throughout the Old Kingdom, 2649 to 2100 BC. Here is an image here of Nubians. His color is reddish brown. However, I'm going to share with you another image of Nubians, all shades of color, black and brown. One of the things that Egyptologists try to do, white scholars try to do, is to make you think that the people of Egypt colored themselves one color. One color. Oh, Egyptians were one color and the Nubians were another color. So be aware of these things. I'm trying to show you guys and teach you guys what to expect when you talk to white people, okay? So that you have confidence in claiming your history. So you have confidence, you have evidence to back what you're saying without you having studied for 2 decades like I have and so on and so forth. I'm presenting to you bona fide evidence. Cut to the chase, okay? Here you have 2 Nubians circa 1500 to 1425 BC. When did I tell you guys the people of Europe came out of their dark ages? So you're talking over 500 years. Over 500 years before the Europeans had any light. Here you have African people in cooperation with each other. You have African people looking at nature as a part of God's universe. They've incorporated the animal kingdom into their civilization in the most pious and respectful manner. When you see these images, you're not seeing Black people at each other's throat. You're seeing images of cooperation. You're seeing images of brotherhood, of sisterhood. That's what you see when you study ancient Egypt. You're not seeing that when you study European history. During the Middle Kingdom, and particularly in the 12th dynasty, 1981 to 1802 BC, when did the Europeans come out of the Dark Ages? 900 BC. The Egyptians built fortresses in the region of the Second Cataract in order, building fortresses in the region of the Second Cataract in order to secure access to this gold, as well as to defend against the rising kingdoms of Kush farther to the south. However, Nubians also lived in Egypt as respected members of society, and Nubian archers at times served as mercenaries in the Egyptian army. Okay, let's look at America. Let's look at Atlanta. Let's look at New York. Let's look at Boston. Here you have people who may have grown up in a rural area, who may have grown up across the country. But because there is such accumulated civilization and things going on in major cities, what do people do in the rural and outlying places? They migrate to the big cities. So here all throughout the continent of Africa, you have regular African people migrating to Egypt. They understand the culture, they understand the language, they know the people. In the same way that Africans today will go to other countries and be able to adapt, and because the cultures are so similar, the languages are so similar. Here we are in America and we all speak English, but it's variations of English. You go to some places in the South, I haven't even been able to understand what they were saying. They're speaking English. You can go to Boston and not understand what some people are saying and speaking English, accents. And I say this to break down all of this. The people of Nubia was distinct and separate from the people of Egypt. They never interacted. They were culturally and racially. It's absolutely ridiculous. A Black African in Kenya and a Black African in Uganda, they're still Black Africans. Even though they have a different culture, a different language, they're still Black African and they still have an African worldview. It was no different with the people from Nubia and the people from Egypt. So much so that here, oh, that's something else. Hold on. I want to show you something else. All right. You see this image to the top left above the history of Nubia? Oh, man. I thought I was going to be able to. Hold on. Figure 8. This is Kemsit, the Nubian queen of the Egyptian king Mentuhotep II, 2061 BC to 2010 BC, and her servants from a painting in her tomb chamber. This woman is black as black. She's married to the Egyptian pharaoh. Let's see who is Mentuhotep II. And here Queen T, married, straight Nubian woman, married to the most powerful man in the world, Amenhotep III. Nefertiti was her daughter-in-law. Her son was the pharaoh, and she's Nubian. So how can you keep saying that Nubians and Egyptians are different people when we're showing all throughout Pharaonic Egypt that Nubian pharaohs that Egyptian pharaohs made Nubian women their royal wives, and their children became royal heirs and actually ruled Egypt. But yet the Egyptologists, the white Egyptologists, want to keep sticking you to the 25th dynasty and saying that African people, black African people, never ever ruled Egypt until the 25th dynasty, which ended in 664 BC and started around 750 BC with Piye, which is absolutely ridiculous. But if you don't know, we tend to believe any white person who talks with a level of authority and have a big degree behind their back. Straight liars. They straight liars. They know the truth, but they are liars. But they are liars. So let's share here. So I want you guys out there to be ready, because these people ain't just going to accept this any kind of way. They're not just going to lay down. They're not just going to lay down and acknowledge our history. They're not going to do it. They're going to continue to lie until they die. Why? Because racism is about power. And they're trying to maintain power. They don't care about the truth. They care about power. And the truth is disempowering. They know how brilliant you are, Black people. They know they can't destroy you. Again, every other people they came in contact with, they destroyed them. What other group of people emerged from European enslavement other than Black African people? What other people? They vanquished everybody else. And half them Native Americans that they got there today, they white people. They ain't no Native American, they white people. I've been to Oklahoma several times. Was introduced to the head of one of the Chickasaw Nation. I'm like, you is a white man. What are you talking about? And we believe them. We can look just how they'll show they saw an African person and wrote down they're white. We see a white man and write down that they're Native American. What is going on, people? Please don't let these people mess with your head. Please don't let them do it. Please don't let them do it. All right, let me go back. All right, once again, here's Kemsit. Royal wife of Mentuhotep II. Oh, I know what I was doing. I was supposed to show you guys Mentuhotep II. And I'm using Wikipedia. Once again, I use the whitest of the white sources so they can shut up. This is the painted sandstone statue of Mentuhotep II. If he ain't Black African, what is? This is him. And let's see his wife. And look at his wife. Lo and behold, his wife. Him, his wife. What are their children? What are their children? They damn sure not white. And African people, we knew the difference in color. Who are the people attending to her? Oh, 2 white women. What white people have done has flipped history upside down. Flipped everything upside down. And where's this book? Okay, I want to show you the source again. Let me show you the source. Let me show you the source. Let me show you the source. Voila. Look at the source. Okay. Now, in order to get a copy of this, you actually have to do a loan, but the link takes you to how you get the loan and all of that type of stuff. It's absolutely free. It takes no more than 3 minutes to do. But you have to have the evidence because they'll tell you a lie. They'll eat you up. If you're not prepared for them, they'll eat you up. But the great thing about it is this: you can't run from the truth. You can lie all you want to somebody put the truth right in your face. Then what you gonna do? Well, we know what they're gonna do. They double down on their lie. This is an image of Nubians paying tribute to during the King Tut era. This is a wall painting showing a procession of Nubian princes carrying rings and bags of gold, arriving in Egypt from the Theban tomb of Huey, who was the king's son of Cush under Egyptian king Tutankhamun, 1334 BC to 1325 BC. Look at this image. When did Europeans come out of their dark ages? Around 900 BC. And that period, when they talk about Europeans coming out of their dark ages, they're talking about the appearance of the Iliad and the Odyssey being what demarcated Europeans or the Greeks from moving out of the realm of darkness into a civilized state of mind. Okay. And here you got nearly a millennia, half a millennia. This is the state of African civilization. And these are the so-called Nubian people who are supposed to be inferior to the more sophisticated Egyptians. Again, this is white people giving you this, showing you this. Does this look like some people who are in the damn dark? And these are Nubians. Look at the different colors of black and brown. Look at the almond-shaped eyes. You see those same almond-shaped eyes in Egyptian images with lighter skinned people. You see varying shades of black and brown. You see them decked out in jewelry. Look at their clothes. They told you you didn't even have clothes. Prior to the Europeans coming, you didn't have clothes. You had nothing. You were doing nothing. Eating other human beings. That's what they say you were doing. You were a cannibal. naked in a jungle. We came and rescued you and saved you. Are you absolutely kidding me? What? The Europeans come and bring civilization. You came and destroyed civilization. You didn't come and bring civilization. I mean, that's absurd. Here on the separate page, you got Upper Egypt, a Nubian soldier named Nenu, about 2100 BC, carrying a bow. The text states that he and his son are Nubian. Both wear a traditional Nubian belt. Look at his household. Okay, here we talking 2100 BC. Both of these are Nubian. We just read that the Nubians had no language. They didn't have any writing. But here you see at 2100 BC, the text states that he and his son are Nubian, both wear a traditional Nubian belt. And this is the history of Nubia. So here you have Nubian artifacts with writing. And you then claim to say that they had no writing. They had no people. This is what happened when you allow other people to tell your history. Okay? These are Nubian. Now, when you see the stone image to the left, to the far left, when you see it in gray, it's easy to think that, well, maybe this may not be an African person. But look at it when it's painted. Egyptians created a stylized depiction of human beings that they carried forth throughout their statuary for a very long period of their history. It wasn't up until the Amarna age in which a more realistic statue style became popular. And that is how you're able to get the statue of Queen T looking the way that it does, more lifelike. And thank God that they did, because if they didn't, we would probably be, sold that these people weren't us. And this is Mentuhotep II. And this is his wife, who's Nubian. And they tell you that the ancient people of Nubia, the ancient people from Kemet were different people. Don't buy it, folks. Don't buy it. All right. Here's some of the pottery. And figure 13 here, this is pottery from 3100 BC to 2800 BC. If you're not in an advanced society, when do you have time to make pottery? Who's making decorative pottery? Who's making jewelry? 3000 BC. Where are the Europeans? Look it up yourself. We're European in 3000 BC. Where is Europe in 3000 BC? Look it up. You will not find it. It wasn't even on the map. Look at the fortresses that were built. Okay? This was built 1900 BC. 1900 BC. This is a castle. This is what we come to know of as a European fort. Look at the architecture, look at design, and then look at the date. I'm not making this up, people. I'm presenting you evidence that white folks got. This does not come from Black people. However, they will never, ever teach this. They can make themselves feel good by putting together publications like this that they know only the super sophisticated will ever access. The only, only a small percentage of people gonna ever read this. They ain't gonna know how to find it. But yet they teach in public school every aspect of European history, Greek history, Roman history, every aspect of it. They teach that. They won't teach you this. Look at this. We were so advanced and sophisticated. This is Nubian craftsmanship at its finest. This is a pendant made of a rock crystal base topped with the gold head of Hathor. This is Nubian. So here we got the Nubians doing what? Honoring the same gods and goddesses as the ancient Egyptians. Here we have the Nubians being able to have the same skill set as the people of ancient Egypt. How is it they know how to do the statues, do the hieroglyphs, and all of this if they're so separate? Furniture. Look at this furniture. Here's the bed, 1600 BC. What type of people in the dark producing something this exquisite? And this is from what? They're producing this from the environment around them. Are they producing and creating all types of equipment that is disturbing the environment? Are they polluting rivers and all of these things? No, in fact, they have to say a vow that they're not going to do these things twice a day in order to be reincarnated. So this is the top. This is a bed from 1600 BC. And at bottom, this is a contemporary African bed in the Sudan. Look at the similarities. Look at this pottery. Look at the dates. 2000 to 1550 BC. Now, you go to Nubia. How would you make this? How can a civilization that is in the dark produce artwork? They could have just made a vessel. I'm going to design it. I'm going to make it fly. Because that's how we are. We make stuff fly. Cosmetics. Oils and fats were used not only for cooking, but also as cosmetics. Both men and women applied eye paint like the Egyptians. They wore it not only for beauty, but also for its medicinal benefits, as it prevented eye infections. Palettes and stones for grinding the eye cosmetics have been found in Nubian graves, as well as toilet articles such as mirrors, razors, and tweezers. I looked up, where's this? When was the mirror invented? Reflective surfaces made of polished obsidian are the oldest mirrors in archaeological record, dating back as far as 4000 BC. The first evidence of mirrors as grooming tools dates to the 5th century BCE in illustrations of elegant Greeks gazing at hand mirrors. You hear that? Hold on. What is Kimset looking into? What is she staring into as they're doing her hair? Some form of mirror. Okay. You look up mirror. Here you got the Greeks grazing at hand mirrors. People. Those who control knowledge Those who control history have the ability to wipe everybody else out of history. That is exactly what the ruling class of people have done to our history. They have done their best to erase it, to hide all the evidence of our brilliance so that they could sell us the lie that they are geniuses and we are inferior, and that we should accept willingly their rule. Absolutely ridiculous. So I'm going to end my lecture tonight, everybody. On that note, I hope you all found the information enlightening, revelatory. And now I'll open it up for any questions, any comments. Are there anything in the chat that was said or questions that need to be asked? Now is the time to do so. So I would like, if you don't know how to raise your hand, you can just unmute yourself. I have any questions? I did that thorough of a job.
Hi, this is Brenda. I have a question. BC.
Okay, well, where are you, Brenda? Let me see.
Do you see me? I don't have a, oh, here, let me see.
Is this you, BITUC?
BC.
Oh, BC? Oh,
yeah. Okay, so my question was, I put in the chat, do you know why it is that these Europeans were allowed and still are allowed to excavate tombs, etc., in Africa? And why were they allowed to see all these artifacts and still keep them to this day?
Great questions. Mm-hmm. It is the conquerors who control history. It is the conquerors who control the land. African people don't control the land that these monuments and all of this history sits on. It's owned by Arabs. Yeah. Okay. The Egyptian government, Egypt, it's an Arab republic as it sits on the continent of Africa. So the answer to that is that the colonizers control the land, own the land, and therefore they control the history. And again, it's the same way as you had countries denying entry into their country of prominent civil rights leaders and other activists like Marcus Garvey. They're not going to let you get close to that and to be able to credibly back up your claims, you know, and that's the same with modern white universities. Okay, I have an Ivy League degree, graduated top of my class, all of that. They will never give me a PhD in Egyptology. They won't even allow me to get a PhD in any University of Virginia, university in the United States of America, in which my thesis or my dissertation would be on the Africanity of the ancient Egyptians. No, you're not gonna come here, not with that. We're not gonna sign off on that and present that and give you this level of credibility. And this is why I want to take a time right now, RIP to Professor James Turner, and all of the students from Cornell from the 1969 Willard Straight takeover who demanded an Africana Studies department and to demand an Africana Studies department that was independent, that was not subjugated under a history department or an interdisciplinary type of thing. And they allowed people like John Henry Clark to come through, Hoyt Fuller to come through. They gave a lot of very important Black historians the legitimacy that's necessary to challenge academia at the top levels. If you don't have certain degrees from certain schools, no one takes you serious. But when you come with these Ivy League credentials, they cannot dismiss easily what you say. So they're guarding all of these institutions. They're guarding to keep people like me out. You know, these governments are making sure that African people do not place a claim on their very own history. But until we have power to do something about it, it's going to continue. And that's what the Black Achievement Fund is about. We're here to, right now, in this moment, 10 million of us, $9 a month, 90 million a month. We could build a school every month, hire our own teachers, establish our own curriculum. But that can only happen if we're paying the teachers. But if the teachers are scared to get fired for teaching this, they're not going to teach it. If the principal is scared to get fired for teaching this, he ain't going to teach it. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I try to put a positive spin on it as well. Was that it?
Yeah,
I believe that what you're doing now is the start of that changing. You know, I've been around a long time, and it's for when that doesn't change. The way you're going about it, I've seen, I'm from Virginia, but I moved down to Florida in 2007, and I see so many other places that same thing happened. But you are doing it, and also with the internet, it won't be like in Tulsa where it was just that little city and was nothing could be done when it was gone. The way you're going about it, it's going to be the world. And I just believe, maybe I'm crazy, but I think this is going to be the start of what we've been talking about for years. You know, that change is going to come, and how what's up is coming down. I see it already, don't you? Don't you see some at the
Don't
top
even
coming
keep
down?
doing this. You know, I'm extremely optimistic. You know, having this
Me
knowledge
too.
and knowing that we possess, you know, this incredible DNA that was able to accomplish so many things, to know that I inherit that, to know that that's running through my veins, that is what gives me the optimism to say, we're going to get 10 million Black people, put $9 in, and we're going to turn this around in our generation. I'm doing it because I believe that it can happen and that it's going to happen. So, you know, thank you for that vote of confidence. You know, we are coming around, and for that very important question too, BC, because we need to understand the power dynamics and what is preventing us from being able to gain the type of mental liberation that we need from racism. And what white people don't understand is the depth to how racism has affected the psyche, the self-confidence, the self-esteem of African people. And to know this and to not fight your butt off to tell the truth, it just lets me know that you still have not reached a level of redemption. As liberal as you may be, you're holding on to the power of racism because it benefits you. Because at the end of the day, if you take the handcuffs off of Black people, can you truly compete with us? Can you truly compete with us if you did not discriminate against us at every stage of the game? Could you truly compete with us? And I don't think they believe they can. Because if you believe that we were inferior as that you say we are at every innately, why would you even have to tie our hands behind our back? Why would you have to criminalize us in such a grand fashion? Why would you have to restrict our history to slavery? Hollywood will sign off on 1 million movies about slavery. Will they ever sign off on a movie about any of the pharaohs that I've been teaching? Any of the history that I've been teaching, will they ever sign off on that? Will they ever come and consult me, an African historian, an African person, on any documentary, anything they're doing about ancient Nubia, about ancient Kemet? No, they just go get other white people and have a whole conversation about African history and African culture with amongst all white historians. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. Not a Black face in sight. And they can't even see their own racism. And these are supposed to be the liberal people. We go get it together. we need you to join the Black Achievement Fund and stop playing. Ain't nobody trying to steal your $9. Stop it, okay? And the whole entire $9 is tax deductible, all right? But in order for us to continue this mission, we need members. We need capital. Otherwise, this whole Black Achievement Fund goes away just as quick as it came here. So if you're feeling what we're saying, stop sitting on the sideline. Go to www.ba. I'm gonna make it easy for you. I'm gonna show you right now how to get to it. I'm gonna show you guys right now. www.baf.solutions is going to take you right here. As soon as you come on, you see the join. Become a member. We are a nonprofit 501c3 corporation. All membership contributions and donations are 100% tax deductible. Membership of the Black Achievement Fund is open to anyone who believes in our mission and our guiding principles, regardless of race, religion, political preference, or sexual orientation. And we have individual memberships. We have a gift membership if you want to give this to someone else that you love. We have honorary memberships that you want to make in a dedication to a lost loved one. We have nonprofit membership as well as business memberships. And for our nonprofit memberships, we have grants available to those nonprofit members after 6 months of membership. So join the Black Achievement Fund. If you have any questions, you can contact, go to the bottom of the page, and we have a customer service number, 800 number, which a live person will answer Monday through Friday, regular business hours. All right. And if you don't like what we're doing, stop giving your $9. It's that simple. It's that simple, people. But we have to become economically independent. We have to be able to have our own capital so that we can begin to build the world that we want to live in. Okay. BC, do I see another hand?
Yes. The other question I had was, you pulled up the book online about Tutankhamun and the white, you showed the picture of the book, and it was on loan with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts or something like that. So my question is, can you obtain an actual copy of that book, or they only let you loan it out online? See how they do? Okay. All right. That's my question.
So I used to have, so they had a PDF version of this. So I have a PDF copy of it. However, almost all of the new website platforms limit the size that you can upload the PDF. Okay. So the first iteration of my curriculum, the whole entire book was on PDF that you could own. I still have the physical PDF that I can share with you. I just can't upload the physical PDF to the website because it only allows you to do 10 megabytes at a time. Okay, but it's very, very, very easy to borrow it. I mean, it literally only takes, no more than 3 minutes. It's just you putting in your email address and that sort of thing, and they give you up to 2 weeks to borrow it. But you're right, it's not accessible, and they will not put this material in a public school curriculum. They know that libraries and these things, that is highbrow, that is for scholars. It is not for laymen. And we need to be able to have this incorporated in the curriculum. We need to be able to teach history from the origins of all humanity, which happened in Africa into the present, and they're just not willing to do it, because to do it is to not only debunk the philosophy of racism, but it's to suggest something quite opposite, that maybe it is African people that are superior. And I'm not going to go down that whole thing because it's unnecessary. You know what I mean? We are all here together, and we need to be able to work cooperatively in the same way that you see African people all throughout the continent, all throughout the rock art, everything that you read. And this is white people telling you that, So thank you guys once again for the commentary, the great, great, great questions. And this is our challenge. we are the next civil rights movement. We are the next leaders. And the sooner we understand that, the sooner as we understand our position within the Black liberation struggle, the sooner we're going to turn this thing around. But you guys out there, I can't do this alone. You got to share this. You got to make your grandkids see it. You got to make your husband see it. You know, Black women are the educators of the race. Women typically are the educators of all races. So you have to make sure that your children have this fundamental knowledge, because when they start getting up in age, say for instance, they want to be a painter, they want to be a designer. Now you got African designs, African art as an inspiration, as opposed to their study only beginning with Western civilization. So now I see Black artists having European Enlightenment artists as their inspiration. And I'm saying, you know, what if they knew their own stuff? What would the inspiration be? You know? So join the Black Achievement Fund. Stop playing, everybody. We're not going anywhere no time soon. So all the stuff that you're hearing, you're going to keep hearing it until you join the Black Achievement Fund. So you might as well join now so that we can get the show on the road much quicker than waiting on the sidelines for another 6 months to see whether or not I get indicted for fraud or something like that.
I think I paid for it on the 16th of October, but I haven't heard back from it. I paid for a year.
Oh, thank you. You should be receiving, probably next week, you'll receive your packet and your t-shirt and all of that type of stuff.
Oh, well, I thought because I received this that you were giving it, you know, tonight. So I'm hoping you got the money.
What's your name?
Gloria Ingram.
I do remember seeing your name, Dr. Ingram. I will, let me
With an I.
I will follow up with you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
I know you're busy. I was just, you said it twice. I said, well, maybe he hasn't gotten it yet, but.
I'll check on it tomorrow for you. I'll make sure
Okay.
it's very, very, very soon.
Okay.
All right, everyone. I'm going to sign off at this juncture. Thank you once again for attending. Thank you once again for sharing this. Make sure that you like it on YouTube, and make sure you join the Black Achievement Fund, www.baf.solutions. Until next week, same time. See you guys again. And on Sunday at 2 p.m., I think we'll be having a live info session on the Black Achievement Fund if it's not our members meeting or something else. But tune in on Sundays at 2 p.m. on our YouTube channel or on our Zoom.